welcome back to Casual Obsession, a horror movie podcast. I am Noah, here today with Nina, Emma, and Jeff.
Hello.
Hey.
The movie today...
Yeah! I had to
The
be
movie
different.
today... Stop interrupting me, Jeff. How dare you? I'm just trying to talk about how today we are watching James Wan and Leigh Whannell's Insidious. Insidious released in 2011, international debut at Toronto International Film Festival in 2010. I only mention this because I found, firstly, this movie was so hard to do any research on. I don't know why. There's nothing on this movie anywhere I looked around. There's the Wikipedia summary, but even within the Wikipedia summary, there's no fun anything. Nothing is interesting. Nothing is there. There's no good stuff for you to pull from. It's so stupid because it's such a huge movie. But a lot of people will list this as being 2010's Insidious. This is 2011. 2011 is when it made its official theatrical debut. It was only in the film festival circuit before that. I feel like, I don't know. I wanted to clear that up because I heard both dates several times across the various podcasts I tried to listen to.
Yeah, so for the rest of this podcast, we are going to refer to official releases as being the theatrical release because nobody cares about film festivals. They're for nerds.
No. They
Exactly.
are for nerds.
I'd love to go to one, but also, yes,
They're
they're
for
for
nerds
nerds.
and rich people.
You can
Yeah,
watch a movie
yeah.
anywhere. Why go to a festival for that? Yeah.
There's a fun experience, though, if you're going to a festival that caters to your specific demographic. I've never been to a horror movie screening that had just horror movie fans in it. You know?
True.
Okay, I see the appeal there.
I feel like there would be... you know what? Well, no, because it wasn't just people. But, like, I watched Hereditary with people who were taking it very seriously, and that made the movie much better for me. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but like,
So, like...
with a festival, though, it's just like, how many horror movies are you going to watch all at once?
And that is the question, isn't it?
That
But
doesn't
regardless,
sound very
that's
appealing to me.
I didn't catch Insidious in the festival circuit, and neither did any of us.
Nope.
No.
So instead, we're gonna go down some of the stuff about this movie. So released in 2011, directed by James Wan, written by Leigh Whannell, composer Joseph Bishara. I mention that because I need to stop specifying why I'm saying anything. It's not important. I really love the soundtrack of this movie.
You do?
Yeah, I really do.
I actually
So-
have in my notes that I hate it, so we can talk about that.
Oh my
Okay.
god, we're already sticking to the Jeff and Noah must have opposing opinions thing.
So here's why I love this movie's soundtrack. So much of the soundtrack is made with natural elements and like nasty sounds that instead of having like an orchestral building soundtrack, your main actual musical music is just that very frightening boom, insidious 37 violin screech at the beginning and end of the movie.
See, I
You know?
don't like soundtracks that tell me when to be scared.
That's fair.
I'd
But that's
rather
the thing,
have
I
the
think-
movie do that.
I think, well, I have opinions about that too, but we'll get into that later in the movie.
I have opinions on this movie's soundtrack and their choice of certain music that I would love to get into later on.
I also think
I want to talk about that.
All right, so important mention, this is a Blumhouse movie. Blumhouse goes back and forth on whether they do good movies or not, really
like
very
Blumhouse.
wildly. That's the problem, isn't
Lamau.
it? So Jason Blum is freaking loaded, and he just throws money at various indie scripts to make a movie. Great, fantastic. It's gotten us some really cool ideas, and it's gotten us some really bad ideas. Blumhouse also gave us Fantasy Island.
I was going to say Fantasy Island.
Fantasy Island was bad.
It was bad.
Fun, but it was bad.
Definitely have to cover that one at some
But-
point.
We do not
Blumhouse
have
also
to.
gave us Insidious. With a budget of $1.5 million, this movie made $99.5 million in the box office.
Nice.
That's a lot. That's a lot of return on this
Hold
movie,
up.
and
They only had 1.5 million to make this movie.
only yes, I actually was dead amazed at that. I definitely would have thought that they would. I thought that they had more money in this movie, but
it
I
looks
thought
like
about
it has more money in it.
Well, that's the thing. How many sets are there in this movie? There's like 3. It's
Yeah,
a
they've
very
got,
low
like,
set movie.
3 houses.
They
and
got-
nothing.
It was a pleasant little surprise when I saw that.
James Wan is really good at making the most of a small budget.
Honestly,
I don't
though,
always like his movies, but boy, he knows how to wring every last dollar out of that thing. Oh my gosh.
He really does. One thing I wanted to point out, this is a PG-13 movie. A lot of people in the horror community will turn their nose up at a PG-13 movie because, it doesn't have the blood, it doesn't have the guts, it can't be scary if it's not rated R, they can't say the fuck word more than once, like stuff like that.
They don't even say it once in this
no,
one.
They do.
Do they?
I thought Patrick Wilson did.
Does he?
I didn't remember.
Notice.
He did yell at the psychic, so I don't remember what all he said in that.
Who knows?
I don't remember. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know.
Think he did.
Well, regardless, that's not important.
Doesn't really matter.
Do you guys... I was going to give ratings for every movie. Not like my personal rating, but like the general rating across the board to see like where my rating landed with those, because I'm kind of curious. Y'all mind that?
No, go for it.
Sure.
So, ringing it at a 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb, 66% on Rotten Tomatoes, and 3.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. These are not great ratings.
I was gonna say that all seems pretty low for how I saw the movie, but I wonder if it was different times. Also, I did, going into this movie, have the added context of everyone telling me that this is like a baseline horror movie that I personally had heard a lot about. One of my friends is doing like horror movie exposure therapy, and this is one of the first ones that she saw. So I really felt like this was kind of a bog standard like horror movie that was pretty renowned as like pretty good.
No, not really. I think it's a good like entry level kind of horror movie. And this is actually something that James Wan does really well. He makes horror movies that have a ton of elements of other successful movies. So, and like, the best example of that is The Conjuring, because The Conjuring is like 3 different movies just kind of crammed into one.
That indeed, yes.
And it winds up being an end product that like a casual or a newcomer to the genre can kind of take in and appreciate in a way that a veteran probably won't. Mm-hmm. But it's still good to help you decide if you want to get into the genre or like how well you'll be able to, kind of.
That's super fair.
And that's why I think these ratings are kind of neat, because you have Letterboxd is a pretty new site, all things considered, and it has it has like the worst score out of all 3 of these. I like it a lot. It's a fun little easy to use thing, but I think that shows like this is current impressions of the movie are not too hot. But here's the thing, like to tie in with that PG-13, that is it makes this film accessible to younger audiences and people, like you said, this is a good intro horror film. People who are afraid of getting into horror movies, a PG-13 will help set them at ease a little bit in that department.
It's more accessible.
And honestly, I think that makes this a great movie for things like that.
Yes.
Before I get into the summary, a little bit of trivia about this. This was not meant to be a series. This was a one-off movie when it was written.
Oh.
I'm surprised by that, actually, considering the
I was
ending.
completely
my
unsurprised by that.
memory of how the second movie like dovetails into this one actually had me thinking like, this is good planning ahead and stuff.
Right?
But no,
no, I was thinking the exact same thing.
They didn't intend any of that.
They made... Now, Emma, you obviously don't know this, so I'm not going to get into any actual, like, spoiler things with the sequel. But the sequel ties, in my opinion, perfectly into this movie, making them a perfect paired set.
Yeah.
Now, if Jackson were here, he'd be like, what about Spider-Man 2? Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2?
And he would be right.
Mm-hmm. So, but like, that is like these Insidious 1 and 2, they tie perfectly together. They resolve the internal story in what I find to be a pretty like satisfactory way.
Yeah, these 2 movies, this one and the second one, the way that they fit together, it doesn't feel like a first movie and then a sequel tacked onto it. It feels more like 2 pieces of a longer story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I throw my odd one out opinion on this one then?
Yeah.
As someone who, this is like my first time dealing with this at all, I hadn't seen it before, and I haven't seen the second one, but I have seen a few other horror movies. To me, it felt like maybe they had like the idea that if it kicked off and made a lot of money, I don't know, but to me it felt like one of those things where you have that woo downer ending that I feel like a lot of horror movies actually do, where it's like, you know.
I disagree with that statement, but continue.
Yeah,
I have
well,
thoughts,
okay.
But I won't interrupt you.
Where it's like, we have this really cool setup. I kind of saw the ending coming as soon as it seemed like everything was okay. I was like, oh, they're going to pull this. And they did. And I was like, that's a really good ending for this, because it had me wondering what was like, what happened after the ending. But I didn't necessarily, it felt satisfying to me, where I was like, ooh, haha, you got me. You know, I didn't feel like it was necessarily something where they were begging for a sequel. To me, it felt like one of those like downer ending kind of things. But that's just me.
Oh. See, I like a bleak downer of an ending, and this is not it to me.
I enjoy bleak downer endings, not because I want to see them all the time, but because a lot of horror movies chicken out of a bleak downer ending.
Yeah, that's why I liked this ending, was to me. And then I like you said, the second one, which I have read a little bit about, does resolve some of that. So I don't even know if I want to watch it, because I do like having it, because a lot of movies do chicken out of it, and this one didn't. And that's part of why I even liked this movie as much as I did.
It's weird because I have a lot of opinions on the ending and the third act in general regarding...
Ooh, I'm excited.
Because I thought this entire time they were trying to build up to a second movie. And so I had complaints about the third act. Whereas now that I know that they weren't planning on a second movie and this was just supposed to be a one-off, it's like surprising to me. But we'll get into that in the like spoilery part of the episode.
Yeah,
discussion.
we'll get to that later.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of all the pre stuff that I want to say. Shall I get into the summary and then we kick off Emma's scare rating?
Let's do it.
All right. I wrote up a fun little thing here. The tagline, "It's not the house that's haunted, it's your son," is, in my opinion, the best way to summarize the movie.
Yeah.
Because we start with the Lamberts moving into the new home and having like little experiences with the supernatural after their son falls into a coma, and that continues after you flee the house. It's not something that you see too often, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So they enlist the powers of Lin Shaye to come. I don't actually know why I wrote down Lin Shaye. In hindsight, I should have wrote Elise, because I'm referring to everyone else in this movie by their given name.
Consistency.
We stan a consistent king.
They enlist the powers of Elise to get them out of the situation, who tells them that their son Dalton is astral projecting and not actually in a coma. I think that this movie is a really fun watch, and I even wrote giving the chills to some hardened horror vets, because I think this movie has good scary moments. I see that Jeff disagrees with me, and
I'm
I think
glad
that's
you
okay.
can see that, even though we're not looking at each other right now.
What are you talking about, Jeff? We're around the big horror table. It's shaped like a pumpkin.
It's funny because I watched this movie with my roommate Stacy, who's consumed way more horror media than I have, and like I physically jumped, I think once during the movie, but like I was very tense the entire time, whereas she like had seen the movie before, has seen a lot of other things, and she jumped like I think 3 times and had like physical reactions because she had forgotten about certain things.
So that's kind of what I like about this movie. It's a really good movie for setting a tone. I remember the first time I watched it, I loved it, and I watched it again 2 days later. Like, Jeff, you remember that, right?
No.
Okay, you and I watched the movie, and then we immediately watched it like a couple days later as the movie night movie that we were doing. It was a pretty quick turnaround. We watched it very, very quickly.
So the first time that I ever watched this movie was when I remember coming home and catching the second half.
Was I watching it by myself?
You must have been, because I had not
Oh.
watched it before I came home and found it on. And as a result of that, I think that's part of the reason that I find it so lackluster, as I kind of like messed it up for myself by catching the latter half and then being able to see the ending.
Ah.
Which is the
You know
same
what?
way
That's
that
fair.
I ruined Up for myself. Fun fact.
Oh my god.
can't believe
The
you
first
ruined
time
Up.
that I saw Up, I missed the entire beginning.
The entire part that makes you love Carl.
Yeah, the
Yeah, I
part that,
came
like,
in and everyone was
establishes the
crying, and I was
emotional,
like, "What's going on
baseline.
here?" And then I
And they're
watched
like,
the
oh,
whole
this
rest of the
asshole
movie.
old man, and you're like, yeah, he's an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. But then the second time that I saw Up, I still didn't catch the entire intro. I just caught like the
Oh my
montage.
gosh.
I just caught the montage, and I thought that was the way that it started. And I was like, well, it's pretty sad, I guess. Whatever.
Oh,
But then the
This
third
just
time, I
in.
caught the actual whole beginning, and I was like, okay, I get it more now, but also this whole thing has lost its power, and it means nothing to me.
Jeff is
Dang.
bad at watching movies.
And I think the same thing happened to me with Insidious here. I caught the last half of the movie, and then caught the entire rest of it on a second watch, and was not impressed.
I can see how this is a movie where catching the back end of it would greatly lower the stakes for watching the first half.
Yeah,
if-
and if we, I'll save my next thoughts for when we get into the spoiler part now, I guess.
Okay.
If that's not where we're at right now.
We're not there
No,
yet.
Emma's
Not
got to
quite yet.
give her a rating.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, because I think we've all given like little thoughts of our tags onto the brief summary of the film. So,
So real quick before the scare rating, though, do we recommend this to other people?
yes.
Yeah.
I'd say yes.
Yeah.
I'd give it like a 5 out of 10, but I'd say watch it.
Yeah.
Oof.
I gave it a let's let Emma do it. I'll do the rest of our ratings later. But Emma, how much did this movie scare our little horror baby?
Yeah, so as I've said, I'm pretty new to the horror genre and to horror movies in general. So with that explained, I would give Up a 1 out of 10 for scary.
That,
I'd
that
give it a
makes
3.
sense, I
that
guess.
old man was
That
mean.
old man he knocked
The dogs
skulls
could
Yeah.
off of
all
the table.
talk. You trying to tell me that's not scary?
It's
Dogs
it's 1 out
talking,
of 10
It's not
scary.
natural.
um,
Not
Alright.
natural.
but
It's not 0 out of 10. It's 1.
but Insidious, the most scary movie I've ever seen in my life, obviously, I give a 10 out of 10 scary. As I said before,
fair
it
enough.
only made me like physically jump like once, but there were quite a few like jump out at you kind of scary parts. And the entire time I was very tense, because I'll just get into this a little bit right now, but even though I haven't consumed a lot of horror media, I am familiar with some of like the cliches and some of like the beats that they hit throughout the movies, and when you can kind of expect like jump scares or something to pop out,
You kind of feel it coming, yeah.
you kind of feel it
Yeah.
coming. And there are a couple things that really threw me off with this movie. One of them being, you guys have mentioned the soundtrack, and you have divided kind of opinions on it. But one thing I noticed is, especially in the beginning and the middle of the movie, there's many, many, many times when there's no sound at all, or there's not like a soundtrack
Yeah.
going. And when there is action, that's when kind of the soundtrack picks up, like right when the action
Yeah.
happens. And so it could
Yeah.
really happen at any time. And the way that they filmed the movie, they always had it where in the camera angle, like they had the focal character of the scene, and then they had just enough space in the frame that something else can like pop up over their shoulder or just suddenly appear or happen in the background. And so I was constantly on edge thinking that there was going to be like something.
Yeah.
And sometimes there was.
And sometimes there was. But yeah, so 10 out of 10 scary.
All right.
Very
All right.
scary.
So
Spoiler time.
let's
Discussion
get into the
time.
spoiler time.
Hell yeah.
All right.
This
Wait,
is the
before
spoiler
spoiler
section.
We do, even though we don't really have many things for this movie, we do want to state that we are aware
Oh, yes.
a lot of people have various triggers and like hard times with certain aspects of media, and the horror genre in general can hit a lot of those triggers. So we will be doing trigger warnings for movies that we're talking about. And for this movie, we didn't really have any besides like ghost stuff and possession stuff. But
Yeah, if ghosts and demons are something that get to you, this
probably not your movie.
this
It's on the list, but
isn't-
it's not like even that top of the list. But
Yeah,
there
not-
there are demons and there are ghosts.
not
There
the
sure are.
worst ghost and demon movie I've ever watched, but if that's something that really gets to you, if you do decide to watch, go into it with that knowledge. Just, be aware.
Yeah. But with that, we will kick off our spoilery discussion of the movie. So if you haven't watched the movie and you want to watch it and you don't want to be spoiled, please stop listening now. Or maybe keep listening, but like don't actually listen. Like have your device play it, but like so we get the
Or
views.
just come back
but,
after you've seen the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
But honestly, it's almost a 10-year-old movie. If
It
you
is.
haven't
If you
watched
haven't
it by
seen it,
now,
what are you
I know
doing?
you're not likely to.
Unless someone asks you to record an episode of a podcast.
There we go.
Which could happen.
Yeah.
It could happen to someone here, not me.
Okay, so spoiler discussion. Start.
All right.
So one of the things I love an awful lot about this movie is there is minor to major foreshadowing throughout, right?
Yeah, there definitely is.
The bride in black, especially, being teased in the very opening scene.
Straight
well,
up
not even
shown in the
Oh,
well,
yeah.
straight up shown.
Yeah.
But there's like a lot of other moments, like in the opening credits, where like her outline is seen,
Yeah.
like in the background, things like that.
Really?
I
didn't notice
was-
that.
See,
Subliminal.
but you don't. If you're not looking for it, it's just kind of cool opening credits, and you're
Yeah.
not likely to.
And
one
I
of the-
think it's pretty neat that they started out with the shot of like Josh's bedroom in his childhood home, and then the woman in black, and then the final shot is where she has actually taken over him. I think that's cool. That's a neat connection.
It's a good mirroring. I love that plays out throughout the whole movie of like when he's having visions, you think they're of Dalton, but they like call direct attention to that when he actually goes into the further and he thinks he's seeing Dalton. He turns around and sees his younger self.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so that plays back into all those visions we saw earlier. It was you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And-
pretty cool.
Before we move past this, I loved. So, you exit Dalton's room, and you're starting to go into the house, and you see the outline of the woman in the window,
Yeah.
and you see her walk to the side, and then you turn a corner, and it almost looks like there's a light at the end of the hallway. But then, as it advances, you very quickly realize it's just the woman in black holding a candle.
Yeah, and that actually is the beginning of something that I don't know, you guys somebody probably noticed, if not all of you. There is this like recurring, not really a theme,
hallway shot?
but I guess a visual gag with windows.
Oh,
Did you
No.
notice this?
I thought you were
You're
going to
gonna
talk
have to
about.
go a little further before I realize
Okay,
whether or not I noticed
so
it.
there is this recurring occurrence in the movie where you see something on the other side of a window, and then the camera will like pan away, or you'll see something else, and when you go back to look at the window, maybe the thing is gone, maybe it's still there, but then you come back to like the main character and suddenly the thing is right there, like in to jump all the way to the end when Josh finds Dalton in the demon's lab, and he looks up at him
right.
up in his office, and he sees him up against the window, and then it pans down to him, and he's
and then
just
he's
standing
like
there.
outside the window.
Yeah.
I gotta say that is one of, in my opinion, the funnier scenes where he's just like up against the glass, like
Yeah, he's just pressed
And
right
then-
up to it. Yeah, but
and
that
Josh is
that
like,
kind of
oh
thing.
shit, and then he comes down and he's just like, I'm here.
I literally could not be less scared of a demon character.
Right.
I have never been less scared of a demon character in my
They
life.
didn't make him look real scary. But,
Yeah,
this is a thing that happens a lot with windows in this movie. It's the same thing
Yeah.
with the Danzig guy when he first shows up.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
pacing
tall
around
Danzig.
outside the bedroom window, and you see him walk around. You see him walk past the window a couple of times, and then suddenly he's inside the house. Which I think is a really cool moment, and I wish the soundtrack didn't ruin it. Because
the
that
soundtrack
could
is
be,
very jump scary.
Yeah, that's my problem. It's all relying on startles. That's my big problem with the soundtrack. That's my problem with the scares in this movie. It's all based around startle responses, which have nothing to do with what actually scares you. It's just a startle.
Now, here's what I do like about the soundtrack, though. When it comes to a scare moment, it doesn't build up scares in the same way that a lot of other movies will do. In my opinion,
True.
you'll have a lot of times when the music cue punches in after the scare has happened.
True.
It lets the scare come naturally first, and then it pops in.
Yeah, and all the soundtrack that is there is cool sounding, and I like it. I just wish they had utilized it a little bit differently.
I thought... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Emma.
Yeah, with my perception of horror movies, and the soundtrack thereof, a lot of my understanding and expectations of what it is there's the creepy low music playing as the person's walking through the dark hallway, and then suddenly it picks up and scare happens. And so with that kind of expectation of what music in horror movies is, my thought process is okay, so when the music starts playing, I understand something's probably going to happen pretty soon, and typically there's a timing or a pacing to it that you can kind of adjust to and get used to know when the scare is going to happen. And with this movie and the soundtrack not picking up and not doing that, and the sound only really playing as the scare is happening, it threw me off a lot, and it kind of challenged my expectations and my
Your
ability
perceptions.
to perceive when the scare would happen exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
and
can't, brace
there
for
will
it.
definitely be movies that have exactly what you were expecting to happen will happen, because that is a trope for a reason.
Yep.
But
I think my favorite egregious example of that trope is in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, where every single time things got intense, an air raid siren started to kick into the background, just slowly building up until the break moment when, Batman throws Joker into a window and runs out of the room, or whatever it is that ends up happening.
yeah,
There will be moments that are that in your face blatant, and then there's going to be other times when it's something like this that is intentionally misleading you.
yeah.
You know what? I just
And-
realized that the entire flow of The Dark Knight is just the Joker is in places, and then Batman shows up, and the Joker makes him so uncomfortable that he has to leave. And that's the whole movie. Just over and over.
Yeah,
Bruce Wayne is a place. The Joker shows up to that place. Bruce Wayne leaves. Batman comes in, kicks the Joker's butt just so that he's not there anymore, and then he leaves.
and then the Joker's just like, what if I dropped her out a window? What if I told you she might blow up? And Batman's just like, oh, and he leaves.
I gotta get out of here.
But I had something to say about the soundtrack really
Okay.
quick. I've watched a few movies recently where most of the music used was diegetic, if any music at all. I watched Hard Candy with Ellen Page, and that's more of a thriller, but there's no music through most of the movie except for 2 scenes where it's diegetic. So I noticed it with this movie, but I was like, that's just a weird trend in movies I've been watching recently. But now that you mention it, Emma, it is pretty, I think it's pretty cool. I think it lends something to the movie. I wish the music that was there wasn't as jump scary though.
Yeah, and for those in our audience that maybe don't know what diegetic means, could you
thank you.
explain that
Yeah,
real quick?
some of our
Right, yeah.
listeners
I know
might
what it
not
means.
know. I know I
Diet-
know what it means. But
Diegetic diegetic just means that the characters in the movie can hear the music. It is playing from a radio or something in the scene so that the characters in the scene know that it's happening. If it's not diegetic, that means that they can't. So there's some diegetic movie in Insidious, for example. They put on a record player and it starts playing one song, but then when she leaves, it starts playing another different song, which is
spooky song.
the spooky song.
That song, like, I was Netflix partying with another friend too, and she was like super creeped out by that song. I thought it was fucking hilarious, and
I thought it was funny. For
it
sure.
just like made things so much easier for me in those scenes, because I was just like dancing along and having fun.
Yeah, they put it in like it's supposed to be this really, really scary song, but then it's just if you look at it as being goofy, it's just goofy.
Yeah.
I think Vine ruined it specifically for me, because there are a few Vines where they use it to, like, I don't know, like, there's one, it gets bass boosted after the, like, little drop, and a butterfly, like, gets eaten alive, and it's just the goofiest fucking thing. So that's the context I went in to the movie with. So thanks, Vine, for making me laugh at the scene where they reveal the demon. He's like sharpening his nails.
I think that's a comical scene anyway. I don't think that has to be ruined for you. I think that whole scene, the way it plays out, just looks so like
so
comedic.
Funny.
It's a little rough, yeah.
Can confirm.
It's honestly
they're trying to channel their Freddy Krueger energy, and it just doesn't
exactly
play
what
out.
I was thinking. It reminded me of the Freddy making the glove scene, except like, comedy parody of it.
It's regarding the demon's design, because a lot of the costuming and the makeup for like the various ghosts that they see, especially like the old woman ghost that you see at the beginning and at the end.
Yeah, the other ghosts look good, I think.
They look really good. They're very, very creepy. Was really, like, unnerved by them. When they were talking about the demon and, like, the lady was describing seeing it on the ceiling and was describing it to the guy, and the guy was drawing it. That drawing looked really creepy and was really cool.
The first couple of looks that we get are really good. Like the one that the mother-in-law talks about from her dream when we see that.
Yeah.
That looks good. If they would have kept him looking like that and kept him, like, vague, he would have been so much better.
I have that in my notes, too. I was so sad because that first shot, he's got better horns. He's got, like, weird pierced ears. He doesn't look like he's got a big bald spot.
Yeah.
Like, if they had leaned into the Darth Maul look more, I really think it would have treated them better, because I think it would have been scarier.
Or just, like, give him hair or don't.
Yes.
Don't give him the horseshoe.
No. And here's the deal. I would have taken an entirely different direction with him as a designer, because when she said blood red face as she's describing him, I almost imagined like someone who didn't have a face. It's just kind of like bloody and kind of gross.
Yeah.
But it's a PG-13 movie, unfortunately, and I think that's how we ended up with Darth Maul.
And he is actually listed in the credits as lipstick face demon.
Yeah.
That's even what?
See, so firstly, they should have just listed him as red-faced demon. But
lipstick face
well, here's the
demon.
thing.
Or
it's
just
because his
demon.
makeup was lipstick.
They don't have to specify anything. They can just call him the demon. There's not another demon
He is the
in
only
the movie.
demon. He is the only demon in the movie.
Yeah.
You don't have to give him a stupid name.
And actually, so that actually does raise a theory I have here, right?
Oh.
So, when Elise is giving her talk about the Further, she talks about how it's a realm of the dead, right? But I think it's kind of clear that there's some, like, other things going on there, too. Like, it's not
I actually
just
have in my
dead
notes
people.
that I kind of want to know more about the Further. Like, is it like a purgatory? Is it a limbo? Is it hell? We see a group of people.
It's not hell.
Reliving their own violent death, apparently. So what's happening?
I think
here?
it's more of a limbo thing, because it's not hell, because I think she does specify that it's not hell.
Okay.
And if she doesn't in this one, then she does in a different movie.
Yeah.
But it also, like, it seems obvious that Lipstick Face, that's what I'm calling him, Lipstick Face is kind of, like, in charge. He's kind of, like, controlling the other ghosts and stuff.
Spoilers here, Emma, but each movie has a ghost that seems to be more in control than others, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, you've got the wheezing man, I think his name is, in the third one.
I think they call him Lil Wayne.
Lil
Lil
Wayne.
Wayne.
Yeah, you got Wheezy.
Wheezy.
You know, and then you've got the Keymaster or something.
Well,
I don't know,
That's
some
good.
dumbass
That makes
name in the last key. But you know, like each one has its own like top dog. And I really shut up. And
Dog.
it makes me think, because like the way I see it, Lipstick was the definitive ruler of his little corner of the further. He had a
It seems that
physical
way.
room that was his room. It wasn't anyone else. It wasn't, you know, the Lambert's house on this eternal time loop.
Right.
It was his room.
And I
with
want to talk
his
more about that
things.
room later.
Okay, cool.
But it can
In my opinion, and he's not a human. He's got goat hooves.
Yeah.
You know,
he's
And
all
a
the
tail.
other
hooves,
ghosts
you
we
bitch.
see. Exactly. Those his hooves.
Those are his Wheezy part 2. Yeah.
Like, the way I see it, that means that he is actually a demon, while everyone else is just an ascended dead person.
Yeah.
You know?
But they don't really talk about what being a demon means. It's not.
and they
like,
No.
really don't.
This guy doesn't
So-
work for Satan, apparently. They don't
So
get
yeah,
into
that's
it
I
being
had thoughts on that one.
like a Christianized concept of a demon. He's just kind of
There
a
was no
malevolent
religious
spirit.
imagery,
Yeah, none
which
at
is
all.
something that because we've watched
There's a priest
3
who's
movies,
present for about 15 seconds, and then
15
he's gone.
seconds.
Well,
and then
on
he's
that
gone.
note, actually,
Yeah, why was he
what
there?
Was
What's up with
wrong?
that?
No. Here's the thing. What is wrong with Josh?
That he
walking,
comes-
no, because he walks in, knowing his wife is having a bad time, and he's like, "Why is there a priest here? You haven't been to church in years." And it's like,
Yes!
dude,
I have that
if your
written in my
wife
notes.
is
I
looking
just
to a
wrote-
priest,
I have that
Can
in my
you-
notes. I just wrote dick.
yeah,
Because he's being such a dick in that moment
is.
and throughout
Like-
the entire movie, really.
throughout the movie.
like his wife is afraid,
Yeah.
and she is reaching out to a priest, and she hasn't been to church in years. What
That
what
should
in that
clue you
moment? What in that moment made him think, "Oh, my bitch wife out here talking to a priest. What is this? The start of a bad joke?" And then he just like waits in silence for someone to laugh, and he's like, "Hey, taps Mike. The start of a bad joke?" And it's just like,
Yeah,
no, dude.
and I think there's a
it's
couple
not
other
funny.
moments in the movie where he like goes to make a joke and it doesn't land because it's not funny. And
And there are some
there were a
theories
couple of
as to
moments
why he's
where
like that, too.
Becca pointed out that she didn't think he was acting very well, and I don't think that can be it because it's Patrick Wilson. Patrick Wilson is a really good actor. I think he's trying to make this guy unlikable on purpose.
oh yeah.
No, that is actually a heavy theory. Nina, if you want to say your
I
bit
just
first.
want to pull back to the whole demon
sorry.
thing really quick.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's pull
Oh,
back.
I just wanted to drop this before we do talk about how much of a dick the dad is, because I do have opinions. But I was just gonna say, apart from the priests, zero religious imagery. Noah and I have watched 3 movies with demons in them recently. Event Horizon, and then Devil's Candy, and then this one. And Devil's Candy is the only one that had overt religious imagery in it, and I find that really interesting because in this case, I think that the demon is more of like, in Stranger Things, like the Demogorgon, just a being that exists in that other plane.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Because the Further reminds me a lot of the Upside Down in a lot of ways,
for sure.
but the Demogorgon and Lipstick Face both seem to be like I'm in another dimension, but boy, wouldn't I love to get into yours kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That is their whole
Sleazy car
shtick, yeah.
salesman.
Can I say
But yeah, that's all I wanted to say
Yeah.
about that.
real
What's up?
quick, regarding the Further, it's described as this thing that's like obviously far away. It's called the Further. The lady that the family is talking to that describes this place to them and kind of tells them that this kid has been astral projecting and eventually just accidentally got too far away and now can't find his way back because he's in the Further. I was expecting it to be like this thing where he had to get sucked into this very far away place or something, but they've alluded
or it becomes
to,
like an adventure quest or something.
Yeah, they've alluded to this kid like flying around in his dreams and like all this stuff, and then when the adult
and then we get there,
does
that
it,
never happens.
the further is like right outside his door, and I'm like,
and
I
the
think
kid
on
didn't
that
even go
note-
that far. He went into the attic.
yeah.
Well, there's like levels of the further is what I understood from that, though, is that the
Yeah.
kid went far enough into the further that the further locked him off. But since it's a dimension without time and space, really, when Patrick Wilson leaves and he's just like, I know exactly where I need to go, and the further let him do that because he knew what he was doing, kind of thing. That's how I read that.
that you need
Sure.
to kind of have a goal to be able to get in and out, because that is something that they alluded to more than once with like him needing to have one foot in the real world kind of a thing. He needed to be anchored to the real world. It seems that if you the longer time that you spend there, the less aware you are of why you came, kind of a thing, which I love. And it seems that like the moment that Dalton like heard Josh and heard Elise and stuff, he started to like snap back into it and be like, crap, I gotta get out of here.
And I think on Dalton's front as well, it's not that he was like lost and distracted, so to speak. He was simply far enough away that since he thought he was safe because he thought it was a dream, then the demon came in and was strong enough, since Dalton had no concept of the fact that this was real.
Yeah,
The
so he
demon
tied
came
him
in
up.
and was able to overpower the situation.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah.
and that makes more sense than what they actually say in the movie.
Yeah. I
It's
feel like
easy
the
enough to
movie's
put it
description,
together, but the movie itself is like just a little bit too vague on that stuff.
it is always hard to describe, like, this is something I actually had to complain about. I did complain about it to Noah. It's when you have supernatural elements, I may be an exception in this, and it might also be weird for someone who does enjoy like cosmic horror, which has little to no rules, but I enjoy a little bit of a guideline to my ghosts, like how they work
There
in
have
the
to be
world,
rules.
especially when the
There have to
movie
be rules, and it has to be consistent. Yeah.
when the movie gives enough of a shit to like have someone explain what the thing is, like Elise does, where she's like, oh, the ghosts can't be in the physical world, so they want Dalton to be able to interact with the physical world again. But then at the end of the movie, for some reason, they're all able to start like banging on the doors and need to be shut out physically out of the house.
Now, to be
Yeah.
fair, we did see Tall Danzig in the house. I actually
did
wrote him
see
down as looking like Bela Lugosi, because the first time you see him,
he
he's
does have a
standing
little bit
over
of that Bela
the
Lugosi
crib,
thing. Okay.
and I'm like, that vampire-looking dude looks like Bela Lugosi. And
See,
then
I
yeah,
just
we
went
see the
straight
50s
for
kids,
I
too.
just went straight for thinking he looked like Danzig, and I could not turn back from that.
I definitely thought Danzig as well, even though I couldn't like put a name to it.
yeah, once you said it, I also see it, but still. Okay, so I'd like to return to Patrick Wilson.
Right.
Okay.
Let's talk
Because
about Patrick
yeah, let's bitch
Wilson.
about this man.
So here's like, he's obviously not a great dad, right? He's
Certainly
kind of
not.
distanced. There's a lot of theories behind that, and the main one being he just kind of is a little absent due to them wiping the first 8 years of his life.
Which
fair.
makes a bit of sense.
One of those things where since they suppressed those memories, that kind of carried on into the rest of his life, where it hurts his human interaction. That's why
Yeah.
since they shut down his ability to astral project and his memories of the entire situation, he is now incredibly skeptical of supernatural things. He comes in and he's like, I don't know what you want me to do, like,
Yeah.
ghosts aren't real, sweetie, after he watches his door get blown open and like all these situations happen, and he's just sitting there
It's
like,
like the trolls in
oh,
Frozen.
what is this? We just need a rabbi and this is all set to go. Boom.
Yeah, and also Renee brings up his tendency that he has apparently to just kind of avoid problems instead of addressing them, which feels like it would
And
probably be a direct result of that kind of thing.
Yep.
Because what is that if not avoiding a problem but not addressing it?
I actually really enjoy the part where she directly references him like dancing around a parking ticket. And he's like, hey, you watch this, or because like apparently that struck a real nerve. And I found that to be really funny because she's like, you know, with Dalton, the parking ticket. He's like, hey now.
That was a moment that felt a little more real than a lot of their other interactions the rest of the movie.
And see, that's why I feel like that's why he was playing him that way.
Yeah.
Is because he knew he was basically an amnesiac character. And so like little things like that, he just let kind of go to the side and just kind of be like not right. Which is why he was like, you know, he came, like, look at the beginning of the movie. They start out the day, and it's just this hectic. Firstly, actually, no, bigger issue with the beginning of this movie. Who takes time to set up their living room knickknacks, but they didn't unpack their dishes?
True.
I get that you unpack boxes as you go, right?
I was going to say, actually, the bigger problem is that we see Patrick Wilson brushing his teeth, but he's already got his work clothes on. What a rookie.
Okay, yeah, no, that too. Also,
we cannot be CinemaSins. I'm sorry, we just can't.
Okay, fair enough. But I do like the little
Ouch.
like ticks they give him about like apparently he's afraid to get old because he's like plucking his gray hairs and very much like trying to maintain a youthful appearance at all times.
I was kind of wondering
yeah.
what the thing was with that.
I think there's a fun payout with that in the second movie.
Okay.
But, you know, we're judging just on this movie. Blah,
Just
blah,
on
blah, blah,
this
blah.
one.
But yeah, you know, that man comes down. Firstly, how does he not know what a wax fruit feels like?
He just takes a whole chunk out
He's
of
like,
that thing.
aha, polish, polish.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you trying to be like slapstick funny for your kids? But then he's like, honey, where's my fruit? And it's like, hey, buddy, you okay? But yeah, you know, he comes in and it's just a hectic mess. Kids eating cereal out of the giant coffee mugs.
Yeah.
And he's just like, hey, how's everyone doing? High fives people, kisses babies. He's like, well, off to work. Can you take the kids to school? Oh, can't. Can you take them home? Oh, can't. And then he just leaves.
Yeah, there was no communication about
such a
that ahead of time.
dick.
That's not great.
He's
I didn't
such
like
a
that.
dick. I did not like this character. I admit that listening to you guys talk about the nuances of his character is making me like him less and less because I just he was a dick through a lot of the movie. He was nice sometimes, but most of the time I just did not like him. There are characters that like they mess up, they neglect parts of their life, and I still like them as characters, but with him I didn't. And when I realized that he was gonna be the savior in the last third of the movie, I just got annoyed.
It
I was
kinda
like,
makes you
really,
mad,
this
right?
guy's my hero? Suck a dick.
Yeah, he's not great. I don't like him.
I actually kind of liked him.
Really?
Yeah.
I liked him
I liked his
for the
wife.
reasons I'm putting forth. I enjoyed him because he was a well-acted bad character.
I
But
think
it's not
fair.
obvious enough why he's like that is the problem.
I agree with Jeff on that one.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's fair.
You know,
criticism.
I like the amount of detail if we're going to look this closely at it, but we shouldn't have to look this closely at the movie to understand why a character is the way that he is, you know? We should have a better idea just from watching.
I don't know. I disagree because I feel like there's a lot of stuff that you can get out of like show don't tell kind of situations like that.
I think the moment
Yeah.
the reveal hit, when they told him that he'd had his memory erased, that did key in a lot of the shit that had happened in the past. Not just the like, oh, he didn't like having his picture taken, but a lot of the other ways that he acted did hit kind of different at the moment that I heard the reveal. So I do agree that there are some things that like I wish that, but it was by the time that reveal was made, we only had like a little bit of the movie left and they had to wrap up a whole lot of loose ends. So
yeah.
it's just, I'm glad there's a sequel, but
Which I think comes into what Emma was saying about having some issues with the third act of the movie, because it kind of feels like two separate movies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Emma, I do want to hear your thoughts on the third act of the movie.
Do we want to do that now? Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know that we want to kick into the third act quite yet.
Are we
I
sure?
mean-
We haven't even talked about any of the like the mid-era stuff.
Well, this is gonna kind of like talk about that stuff too.
Cool.
It's gonna talk about the third act in relation to the rest of the movie.
In that case, there's one establishing shot I want to bring up
Go for
and
it.
then kick into it.
What is
So this
that?
is what I thought Jeff was talking about with his like reoccurring like thing
Oh.
with the windows
Mm-hmm.
is when in the very beginning you turn the corner and you think it's a hallway, but it's actually the bride in black with a candle.
Uh-huh.
That is very reminiscent of the hallway grandfather clock shot as well.
Ah,
Yes.
yeah.
And
Very much.
every single time you get that hallway shot, it's like, uh-oh, I don't like this. Something is going to
Yeah,
happen.
you know something's up.
Yeah.
There were so many lingering shots on that clock. I kept thinking it was going to come back and be relevant, and it kept
And it never did.
not being important, and I was disappointed. I wrote clock in my notes, and it meant nothing.
Yeah. My roommate Stacy did mention that's a creepy ass grandfather clock, but other than that, yeah.
It did stick
As
out.
long as we all agree about the clock.
Clock is the focal point of the movie, everyone.
They should have called it clock.
Yeah, should have just been clock.
I guess it originally apparently was going to be called The Further, and that was its, I believe, title when it was
Oh.
going to be a single movie. Also, Patrick Wilson got this job, but Ethan Hawke was originally like tapped for the role.
I
Oh.
could see that.
Oh, isn't he the
Was
Sinister
this-
guy?
He's the
This
guy
was
that came
after
out in
Sinister,
Sinister,
right?
You know. Yeah, two negative adjective movies.
I get them
Yeah.
mixed up all the time. Now that
And,
I've seen both of them, I
I
won't.
The
feel
same
like they are
year?
very similar movies, just in different like subgenres, kind of.
They really
Yeah,
do.
Sinister
feel
came out the next year, very close to each other. I think Sinister's better,
Yeah,
but you know,
I like it more.
we'll get into that
But
some
we're
I
more
not
find it
talking about
scarier.
Sinister today.
because Emma's going to talk about her problems with Act 3.
Yeah. Here's the thing with horror movies for me, and my perceived flaws in the horror genre, especially in regards to like ghosts and monster movies and things of that nature. I feel like a lot of times the third act is hard to nail because like the first two acts are where you get to have like a lot of fun with like your monsters or your creatures, where like act 1 in this movie is a lot of kind of like little hints of things and dropping things here and there, having some stuff in the background, and setting up and establishing kind of the premise where they move out of this creepy house and then they're still having problems in this new house, and they're finding out that it's like their kid that's haunted. And in the second act, you're getting a lot of kind of like the creepy haunting moments of like the guy passing through the window and the demon being behind the dad, like during just a regular conversation, and just all this other stuff. You're getting a lot of that, and there's always kind of like the question in these two acts where there's a lot of like most of the movie, it's like normalcy. It's like regular kind of life with these supernatural elements of like ghosts and demons and shit. And then the third act, they're like, okay, now we have to establish like, how do you fix this problem? Like, how do you defeat these demons and ghosts and stuff and return things to normal? And so you have to come up with this like actual solid kind of rule system for the ghosts in some way or the other so that they can be beaten. And in this one, it's like, oh, astral projection, like you're not actually kind of like super haunted, it's just that your kid astral projected out, and oh dad, you can do that too, and like you have to do that to go save your son, and it becomes kind of like this like action movie almost.
It turns into more of like a fantasy movie where you have like the supernatural creatures that you're fighting.
Yeah.
I have this complaint with movies too. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you're like putting into words.
And it's
Well,
such
and also
like
we're just learning things too late in the movie.
Yeah.
We should know everything by that point.
it's such just like a huge shift, and like of course like the guy saves the kid or whatever, and like blah 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 blah, things end happily in quotation marks, but that's the problem I feel with a lot of horror movies, is they try to
Agreed.
take these easy way outs of, okay, now we've got to like root the creepy shit into like a defeatable thing
Yes,
so that the movie can
agreed.
end.
Yeah.
That's a big, I have the same problem. That's why I like the ending in this movie, is because like it wasn't a clean slate defeat.
Yeah.
Like we didn't completely.
It wasn't any kind of defeat. They just kind of outran him.
Exactly. Like they cleaned up all, like it wasn't a clean sweep. Like we didn't like get a happy ending, which is my problem with like I could list so many movies that I have the same problem with. Off the top of my head, A Quiet Place is a big one for me.
I haven't seen that one either.
You are gonna feel that way about A Quiet Place. Sorry to say that, but I have other movies that I really like that don't do that. Like, I think a big one off the top of my head is one that we're gonna hopefully talk about soon, Annihilation, where I didn't feel like they dropped a bunch of rules on me at the last second and tried to make it a defeatable thing. We got reveals, we got like things that cleaned up different story things we were wondering about, but it didn't feel like the last minute, let's turn this into an action movie thing.
Yeah.
No, not at all. If anything, it got less like an action movie as it went along.
Yeah, and that's like one of my things with ghost movies and demon movies is, like you said, hopefully earlier on in the movie or in the middle of the movie, they start introducing these things that kind of pay off in Act 3 as the way that they overcome the problem. And it's hard to do that with ghosts and demons because their whole shtick is that they're like in this other world and they're a bit like unexplainable and intangible, and because of that it's hard to kind of like overcome them through solid like actionable means. But I feel like when you really kind of dig through in world, like in your movie's world and everything, for how that can be done, and like really kind of wrestle with some of like the harder story concepts to have like a better Act 3 that doesn't seem so like out there from the rest of the movie, it pays off really well. But in this case, it fell flat in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And here's a question that I have for as a horror movie thing in general that I'd like to put out there, because it's a problem that I have with a lot of horror movies that encapsulates like what you were just saying, Emma. Does the problem need to be overcome for it to be a good horror movie? Because I feel like a lot of horror movies really want to have the protagonist win, but I don't necessarily go into a horror movie hoping that someone makes it out alive. That's all I'm saying.
I think a couple of my favorite horror movies that I've watched, the ending, like the movie kind of ends with the protagonist in almost a worse situation than they started in.
Yeah. I think like those are great things, and they kind of did that with this movie, and that the dad is now possessed and on the run. But like in the same way, I just like the idea of like in these horror movies they're fighting against this thing and they don't exactly win, they just kind of get away. Like if I think in this case, even though it's like tragic and difficult, and maybe people would complain about it, if they had tried all these different things to try to save their son and there turned out to be this huge sequence where the demon is kind of the demon and some of these ghosts are like terrorizing them in their house, and they eventually just have to face the fact that like they just have to leave their son or something, and like they can't like face this. I think that would be like super interesting bleak and really compelling and bleak, but it would like leave an impact.
Reminds me of the Dragon Age Origins plot, where there's a possibility that you have to like let this kid get possessed or kill the kid, or someone has to die in like the similar plot of like going into this other dimension to try and like get rid of the demon. And there's a possibility in that plot that you just kill the kid to keep the demon from coming into the world, right? It's like that is bleak as hell, but it is also very interesting.
More interesting than just straight up saving him by shoving ghosts around.
You're more powerful than them.
That's something that bothered me an awful lot. He beat
Why
the Danzig guy just
later?
by pushing him into a wall.
Yeah.
Elise is just like, you're stronger than them, Josh. And Josh is like, oh, shoot, you right. And then he just pushed him out of the building.
I hate how Elise is the expert, but it takes Renee saying, Elise, say something, for Elise to say anything helpful.
Elise just like watching him get beat to shit in the further. And she's just like, damn, glad that's not me. And then Renee's like, we brought you here because you're an expert. She's like, oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, right.
Josh,
this is my job.
You're more powerful.
I hated, like, in those scenes that when, like before the dad left, Elise was saying like, okay, like listen to my voice will guide you back to us, like blah 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 blah.
And then she didn't say a
She
single
never
thing.
said a
just stopped
fucking
talking.
thing.
Yeah.
She was like, okay,
Not a
like he has your son, he's gonna come back, and then she's just sitting there like sipping on her tea or whatever and not
Like,
saying
well, he'll
fucking
figure it
shit.
out.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, she's just sitting there. She's like, Renee, you have to call him back.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why are you here?
Yeah. It's like Renee's not the spiritual conduit that has a bunch of experience in this shit. You are. Maybe
All
you
Renee
should be
can
the
do
one.
is scream, "Josh, follow my voice."
No, and you know
over
the
and
best
over
thing though,
again.
and I noticed this first in the in what I think is a really cool seance scene, right?
Mhm.
I thought that was dope as hell.
Oh, it was
It's a
really
pretty
fun
neat
seance scene.
I love how instead of a candle, they had a Fisher Price lantern.
Yeah.
I love
Like that was a
oh,
plastic toy lantern.
I
And then
absolutely love the detective guys and all
my
of their
gosh.
equipment and how blatantly jerry-rigged it is. I love
So-
it
Love it.
so much.
did you know Specs is played by Lee Winnell?
He's the guy who wrote the movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's cool.
that's pretty
but-
neat.
Yeah.
He's a decent actor too.
But after that seance, Josh is out here in the further, and they gave him the same stupid lantern. They're like, "Here, Josh, your only weapon against darkness will be this Fisher Price lantern." And it's like, go beat up Danzig. We believe in you. It's
I
like,
don't get the you're
God, I wish
stronger
that were
because
me.
you're alive thing, because he's been like chased around the house by these ghosts the whole time.
Yeah.
And he's like, if he was stronger than them, I feel like it comes down to believe in yourself, Josh, and then you'll be able to kick ass.
That seems to be
I
it
mean-
when you're astral projecting, yeah, because the only reason Dalton's in trouble, they say, is because he thinks that he's not actually in danger.
Until
And if he were to
knows
just
he's in danger.
think that he was in danger, he'd be able to get away.
but that's
Apparently.
that is actually something that does bug me. Is like, if he doesn't believe he's in danger, he should be safe.
Yeah.
You would think, right?
But he delved too greedily and too deep, and good old Lipstick was just like, hey, how about you tiptoe through these tulips? And that was like the end of everything.
Oh my god. I had one more thing that I wanted to say really quick about like the ghosts and stuff. I thought the coolest sequence personally in the whole movie was the death of the like 1950s family.
Oh man,
Yes.
their
that is
unsettling
that is the
smiles.
one scene of the movie that actually has stuck with me from the first watching.
Yeah.
I like that scene. It's very effective.
It's a good one.
I was the moment where they like. Okay, so this is a two-part thing here, right? Elise says, "Remember, Josh, don't talk to people in the further.
Every
Don't
time he
alert
sees
people."
anybody,
The
he
very
starts
first person's like,
shouting.
"Hello? Do you know where my son, the stolen child Dalton, is?
Have you seen my
Dalton,
son?"
son.
Dalton Lambert. You know, this is his social security number. You can find him here in the further where I'm looking for him." And it's like, so firstly that.
He's
but then
got one
he
little fin, and
but after he tries and talk to the family,
Yeah.
he turns around, they get shot, he looks back, they're dead, and then he turns around and looks back again, and they're all right there.
Yeah.
And then the camera jumps, and they're all smiling the most uncomfortable smile.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I
I liked
love
it.
it so much.
Creepy
I
smiles
love
are cool.
that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one ghost. I don't care about Danzig ghost. I don't care about the Black Bride. I want to know what happened to that girl that made her snap and kill her whole family.
yeah, what's going on there? And why are they
Have you
all just
did you
constantly
listen to her dad
reliving that
whistling?
moment?
That's a good point.
Her dad, firstly, top tier, best whistler that's ever lived.
True. True.
But
Apparently
Like-
so.
do you want to listen to that man whistle and read the paper every day? I know I don't.
I might have shot him too.
And so actually here's a bit of further trivia. With the exception of those two sisters, every ghost in the further is played by a man in Shakespeare woman's makeup.
Really?
Shakespeare
I don't
did it
really-
himself?
Yes.
No, like in Shakespearean style, like
Yeah,
woman's
just
makeup.
like cross-dressing, more or less.
Yeah, like that's what the entirety of the further's vibe was.
It was
I-
supposed to be like you're watching the play of these people's lives, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Which-
love that.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I don't know. It's just one of those like little details that like I don't know. if I think it's like, well, that's really cool, or if it's just like, okay.
Huh.
That
But-
sure is an artistic choice you made.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like, and especially because it does tie in more in the second movie, like details of it.
Yeah, that does. It does
It's-
matter more later.
I don't know. I
have
I
a
figure I
question.
may as well bring it up because it's a thing that did exist.
Yeah.
I have a question because of where Noah's cursor in his notes is hovering.
Oh.
Did anything actually become of the red door? Like, did that actually play into anything in the end?
No.
It was just
That's where the
Okay,
demon's
cool.
office
Yeah.
is, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
was it
He
behind
went
the red
through it,
door?
and that's
Yeah.
where that was.
Yeah.
Right, his
Yeah.
office.
Which actually leads me to some questions that I have about Lipstick Face's office. What is
Great.
that?
He's a
this
doll collector.
Is this a liminal space in? I'm talking like his whole like house that's in their attic behind the red door. Is this like a liminal space that he has altered for his own uses, or did he like make this out of things that he found in Dalton's mind?
I don't think that it's Dalton stuff.
Okay, so hold
Because
on.
I don't.
Hold on.
Okay.
Because we got that spooky horse, and there's
Yeah.
a rocking horse in the house.
You're
and
right.
There's a drawing on Dalton's wall of the horse.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a connection.
I think that was mostly to show that he'd been traveling in there, though, right?
Sure.
Yes.
However, there is also a horse in the house,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and we are shown it pretty blatantly. We're supposed to
You're
pay
right.
attention to it. Also, though, did you notice? Because I didn't notice this on a first watch. I actually noticed this yesterday when I skimmed through it again to compare to my notes and see if I had missed things. When Renee goes up to the attic the first time, right at the start of the movie, to look for her sheet music and stuff, when she breaks the ladder that Dalton later cracks his head on,
Dumb kid.
which actually more on that in a minute.
Yeah.
So when she does that, she turns the light on and the ladder breaks and she kind of sets it back. She looks over to the corner and there's this little like furnace thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the window on the front of the furnace is the same shape and same look as the window into Lipstick Face's lab from where Dalton is
Ooh.
tied up.
Huh.
You know what? I didn't notice that.
It's very once you see it, it's really obvious that it's modeled after it because it's the same kind of shape. It's got the bars on the front the same way. So I can't help but think that there has to be a connection there.
There could be. That's really interesting.
I am not opposed to the concept that there's a connection.
It kind of felt to me like he kind of built that place specifically to be scary to Dalton. Because that's also the corner that furnace is in the attic, is the corner that Dalton looks at when he starts screaming right after he hits his head.
Yeah.
Also, on that note, Renee, when she went up there and that furnace kicked on by itself, that's not the kind of furnace to do that.
Also, why is there a furnace in the attic?
There-
She didn't
like-
do anything the times that she should have done things.
They're like when she's hearing a voice saying, "Give it to me. I want it. I want it." Over her baby monitor.
Yeah.
She should have freaked
Like-
out a little quicker, yeah.
I don't have kids. I don't ever want to have kids.
Me
I'm
neither.
never going to have that level of I'm concerned for my child. But
However,
also, I'm not stupid. I know when you have
you
have
hear
something
any
you care
voice
about,
on a
if
baby
you
monitor,
see,
you freak out and you go check
if you
it
hear
out,
a
right?
danger
Yeah.
trigger thing,
Any voice at all when you know that you're alone in the house. If you hear a voice in your baby's room, you freak out.
Yeah.
exactly.
I don't think Renee and Josh are good parents, though, and here's my evidence for
It
that.
doesn't seem
they,
that way.
They named their second kid Foster. Who
Yup.
names their child Foster and then also dotes over one of their sons way more than the other? I'm sorry, that's mean.
Yeah. Josh comes home with this brand new toy after being at work late. Here you go,
He hands
Dalton.
it to
Share it with his
Foster.
brother. And it's like Dalton gets a bowl for his cereal. Foster gets a mug.
Poor
And he's like, "It's
Foster.
not big enough. You'll make do." And it's like,
Poor Foster.
Well,
Foster's the real victim here.
Foster was the one that got the toy when the dad came home.
Was it?
Yeah, Dalton was
Oh, really?
upstairs already.
Yeah.
oh, but you see Dalton playing with it by himself later. So
Here's my other thing, R.E. You had this in your notes too. But Foster's
Yeah.
like, I see Dalton walking around late at night. And Renee's
yeah.
just like, weird, and then does nothing about it.
Yeah,
she's
she's
like,
just
"Okay,
kind of
we'll
like,
give
well,
you a
that's a
different
weird
room."
thing to say, isn't it?
She clearly doesn't take what he's saying seriously. She's just like, yeah, okay, you can have a different room. Gosh.
Yeah, and then Foster is like extremely freaked out about it.
Yeah.
Also, poor Foster getting an award at school.
And he doesn't
he's
bring
just
it up.
he doesn't feel like it's important enough for him to bring up to his parents. Is
Yeah.
that because Dalton is a bigger thing, or is it because his parents just really don't care?
This is a major subplot of Foster just being neglected.
No.
Also,
for real,
his
for
name's
real.
Foster. That poor kid.
Yeah.
I know we
Anyway,
already
that's
talked
a-
about that, but
So
Super mild
actually,
tangent for
real
me.
quick. So this movie's a spin-off of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends.
Oh, right.
Oh, I never saw that one. That's why I didn't get it. Okay.
Well, now you know.
Now you,
All right,
yeah.
so actually, more on Renee not being a great mom. I have a couple of things that I noticed in the subtext of this movie, I think, if you would let me go off on it for a minute.
Sure.
Please
Like
do,
I have
sir.
already gone off about so many things.
How dare you?
I have done nothing but go off this episode, and I'm not about to stop now. So, Noah, you mentioned having all the living room knickknacks set up, but not the dishes. Did you notice
Yeah.
the first thing that we see her do when she wakes up in the first of the movie? She grabs a handful of books and puts them on the shelf, and then doesn't put any more books on that shelf. I thought that was kind of
Yeah.
weird. So I
Yeah,
looked
she
at
just
the
grabs
book.
her musical self-help books.
Yeah, I looked at the book that's on the front there. We're shown it in a way that kind of makes me think that we're supposed to see it. And it's called Self-Healing Through Music, and the subtitle
Right.
is something about developing your self-esteem. So I'm kind of like,
So-
well, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And then for the first half of the movie, we see a lot of her
Right, on her
playing the
piano.
piano, trying to write music and stuff. Did you guys catch
Mm-hmm.
the lyrics to the song that she was working on?
I
don't
I
remember them.
definitely observed them at the
Okay.
time and thought, very interesting, and then I just kind of dashed them. But she seemed, I think the gist was that she was unhappy with where she was in life.
Yes. The lyrics are like, I'm looking west, I've always been looking that way, I'm gonna be somebody, but I can't be her today. She's very unhappy in
Yeah.
her current situation, probably leading into her being a bad parent. But here's another thing. There is this
Yeah.
through line through the whole first half of the movie where the first thing that the demon reaches for here to try and hurt this family is it attacks her music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it takes her music self-help book and all those other books and it throws them on the floor off of the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
It hides her sheet music in the attic. And then
Yeah, that's a good point.
when she puts on that piano record to listen to it while she's taking the trash out,
Right,
it
he
changes
switches it to his theme
to
song.
his song. Yeah. It's
He
just
does
trying
try
to
and
take
fuck
away
with her a lot.
all of her little safe things to be able to hurt her more.
And
And
that's
the-
really interesting.
Yeah, there's something else I noticed with her specifically as well. When she's yelling at Josh about how he does not resolve his problems and he just kind of takes a big back seat to things, she specifically says, when we moved here, what was it? Let's see. Oh, I didn't actually write down what she said, but she says, I need this to be different than last time.
Oh, I missed that. I completely
Yeah,
missed
so she's yelling at him. Let's see. I need to see if I can find.
Right, because when I read the synopsis for the movie and it said that they moved out of a haunted house into a house that also seemed haunted, but it was actually their kid. I thought that the house that they moved into at the beginning of the movie might have been that second time because of when she said that.
Oh.
But I later found out I was wrong.
But yeah, so I can't find where it actually happened, but I'm pretty sure I'm like 99% sure it's when she was calling out Josh.
Right.
Because like she says, I can't have this be like last time. And I'm like, well, what happened last time? What
That's a
happened to
weird
this
thing to
family?
say,
Why
yeah.
because they moved and she's taking time off from her job to work on music for her
It really
self-help,
seems like she's
writing music,
trying to get away
Yeah.
from something.
There is something
got
she's
something
trying
that
to get
she's
over.
running from. Okay, so I didn't catch all of those lines that you're talking about. I was thinking that she just had like postpartum depression.
Also a strong possibility.
Also,
because they do have that one child who is very young. I thought it seemed
Mhm.
likely. And Josh
Makes sense
takes
to me.
like kind of a peripheral interest in her music,
Yeah.
but ultimately just makes a joke out of it, which shows us that he's not taking the problem very seriously, which is why she needs to address it.
Because he
without
tries
him.
to say, "Oh, I mean, I love your music. What music? All your music." And it's like, yeah, okay, buddy.
But
Okay.
what
She
one's
never
your
plays-
favorite?
She never plays any music when he's home. She only does it when the house is empty. She doesn't even do it when the other kids are around. She only does it when it's just her and the baby, and she even puts the baby to bed first. She only works on this stuff when she's alone.
I liked how much focus there was on her at the beginning, and that's another reason why I disliked that Josh was made this huge focus in the third act, is because we had had way more character building for Renee, and then she's reduced to just yelling, "Josh, follow my voice," for like the last
Again, it's
bit
like
of the
two
movie.
separate movies because we have
It
two
really
separate
is.
protagonists. One that has almost no characterization beyond being an asshole, and one that has a ton if you look for it.
Yeah, no, and like the thing is, Josh has like one or two good moments, like when Renee's like, "Oh, I didn't get much unpacked today," and he's like, "You did great, sweetie, good job, even the little bit that you got done, that's great." And like I was like,
But that sentence was right after he said something about, she's like, "I'm sorry for being so short with you when you got home from work." "Oh, really? Hadn't noticed."
Yeah.
And it's
he's
like,
such a mixed
did he
bag, and
did
by
he
mixed bag,
actually
I
not
mean mostly
notice
negative.
because he can't pay attention to anything, or was it actually just him being like, "Yeah, But I mean, I think we can all agree it's a good thing that he does have a nice couch, because he did spend a
Hey-o.
decent amount of that movie on that couch.
All right, on that zinger, do we want to start wrapping things up at
No,
all?
because I got a couple other things I really want to talk
Oh,
about.
boo! Go
So-
ahead.
I only have one other
Lin-
thing that I wanted to talk about specifically, so let's go. Yeah.
So Lin Shaye dominates every single scene she is in.
She does.
Elise walks into that room and she's just like, "Hi, I'm Elise," and every focus, every single thing is about her, and she's the only person in the entire movie I care about,
Yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's made that way really intentionally too.
And the thing I love most about it is we end up, after she has the really cool scene where she's describing the demon above his bed, which that picture, dead terrifying. I'm sad that the demon's eyes didn't actually glow red or like be totally black like they
Yeah.
were described, and that he had those weird yellow eyes.
Yeah,
Bums me
Yeah.
out. Could have been, that actually would have been the thing that might have saved the design.
maybe so.
But anyway,
Almost.
I love when she's giving the conversation about how Dalton is astral projecting, you know? Because Josh is sitting here looking like a constipated mess. Look worse and worse. The longer this conversation about astral projecting goes on, the more he's like, "I am not happy right now." And that calls back to him being all like mind wiped about what he used to do. But I love how it is something that makes him so uncomfortable that as soon as Renee is like, "I would like to try this," he's like, "This is the biggest crock of shit I've ever heard in my life. Get out of my house." And
Yeah.
Elise is like, "All right, I'm not going to waste your time." And she just books it right
She
out of
just
there.
leaves. Yeah, I thought that was kind of odd. She doesn't try to
get it.
convince him at all. She just leaves.
She's
But
probably
then
been
he
through it
takes
before.
one look
Oh,
at a couple
without
of
a doubt.
drawings and he breaks down crying and he's like, "Well, I guess this is it."
Right? The way the light slowly drained from the scene and it turned like blue tinged further-esque during her describing what astral projection is and all that, also very good.
That was kind of neat, yeah.
Now, that was one of the things I needed to bring up. We cannot end this episode without talking about the seance.
Right.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Is that what you wanted to talk about, Jeff?
No, I wanted to talk about
Oh.
the detectives a little bit.
Okay. I loved the seance scene so much. I love how she's like, "I'm going to be talking really quiet." So, what was his name?
Specs.
Specs.
Yeah, but like Steven.
They never say his real name.
I don't think
just
they
no,
call
she
him
says
Specs.
she says his name.
No, she just said, she yells Specs when he gets thrown into a wall.
No, because she's like Steven Tucker.
Does she say that?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
When he gets
Well, anyway,
thrown into a
anything.
wall, she says Specs, and I thought that was pretty weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
Like, that's the time to bust out the real name.
But like, I love how she has this big gas mask, where she's just like.
I love the way they have the helmet with like the hose that leads to the headphones. I thought that was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that
It's
was
really
I wanna
cool,
know how
but
it
really
works.
fucking creepy. They kept having those
Yeah,
shots from
It was.
inside her mask showing her
I was
like
just
vision,
about to bring that
and I
up.
kept thinking
Yeah.
I
like
love that.
something was gonna be there.
Yeah.
I love those shots so much. It was just like, it was a very uncomfortable, claustrophobic shot that she's just like jerking her head around a little bit and looking at everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you got Tucker walking around the perimeter, and he's just like waiting for his cameras to take pictures of ghosts punching
Right.
the table and stuff like that. And then Dalton just comes in, and he's just like, "Get out, run."
One other thing that I really liked about the mask, this is actually another thing that made me laugh during the movie. I saw a video one time where somebody had a gas mask that was in that style, but they altered the hose so they could just stick it around the end of a bong.
Yeah, bong
And they
masks.
just smunk the weed. So I assume that's what she does when she's not seancing.
Oh, without a doubt.
Makes sense. You know, one thing I love about Elise before we move on to the detectives, because I feel this way about the detectives too, sometimes you get a character in a movie where, like, you think they're pretty cool, but you can tell that the writers thought they were the bomb in a very loving way, not in a we think this character's cool so you have to, but in a we love this character. And I get that so much in the way that Elise is written, where she like
Yeah.
shows up and she's like, hello, I'm Elise, and she's very sweet, and then she just has so many good moments.
Yeah.
You can feel the love that they had for her
Yeah.
in the way that she's portrayed on screen, and I love that about her.
So that actually links into me talking about the detectives, because me talking about the detectives has to link into me talking a little bit about Poltergeist. I'm going to try to hold back here because we're not talking about Poltergeist today, and we're going to talk about similarities between this movie and Poltergeist another time. But I have to mention today that this movie seems to me like it is James Wan's attempt at making his own version of Poltergeist.
I can't wait
James
to watch
Wan
Poltergeist and
has
figure
said
that,
that he is a huge Poltergeist fan. It was like a game changer for him. So we know that that influence is present, and I could not help but see it everywhere in this movie the moment that the detectives showed up. So,
And Specs and Tucker are the detectives, right?
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And
I just wanted to make sure.
Elise as well fits into a part of it, and the way that Elise is shot fits into that as well. Not going to go into detail about that. I will talk about that on a later episode when we are talking about Poltergeist and when we're talking about the similarities between this movie and Poltergeist. In any case, I love that the detectives don't have the jobs that you would expect them to have, because Specs is the more like traditionally nerdy looking guy, so you would expect him to know more about the equipment. But he could not care less about the equipment. He makes fun of it all the time.
He's just like,
It's actually
"Nerd."
just kind of modified toys, and
Yeah.
Tucker just looks at him like,
And Tucker's like, shut up.
"Excuse me."
He's like, that is uncalled
Yeah,
for
I
and
love
very
how
bitchy
Tucker
of you.
is like the bigger, like less nerdy seeming guy, but he is so much more into that stuff than Specs is.
Yeah, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, words are worth
1,000 words
1,000
too.
words.
I loved the exchange. Everything about the way that those two talk to each other is so great, because it feels like they are far deeper characters than what they are actually shown to be in the movie. You know, because their
Yeah.
part in the movie is pretty small, but the particular characterization to them, I mean, actually looking at it, knowing that Lee Whannell wrote the movie, it makes sense that he gave himself one of the best roles. But
Yeah.
And honestly, those roles are something I'm very happy with too, with how fleshed out every character in this movie feels.
yeah, without
like
actually
Lorraine,
having to
right?
see very much of Specs and Tucker, we feel like we know them.
Yeah.
Without
Yes.
seeing too much of Elise, we feel like we know her. Without seeing too much from Lorraine even, we feel like we know her.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
only
The
character
Everyone
character
has
we
a
don't know
place.
about Foster.
Poor
Poor
Foster.
Foster.
I was about to say,
Absent
honestly, the
from
person
narrative.
the person we know the least about is Dalton, in my opinion, because Foster even gets more character development because he's awake longer than Dalton is.
That's true.
True.
Dalton is comatose for 2/3 of this
Dalton
movie.
is a non-character, and not to draw parallels to Stranger Things again, but he does remind me a lot of Will in the way that, like, he's just kind of there.
His name is very important.
His
I was
name
actually.
extremely
I was
important.
gonna say he's kind of a Princess Peach.
Very much
Because
so.
we see him at the beginning of the movie just enough to get the impression that we're supposed to care about him, and then the whole rest of the movie is about getting him back.
Yeah.
His one scene with his mom at the beginning is so sickeningly sweet and boring that I knew something bad was going to happen to him. Ooh, woo, is there a picture of me as a little kid? Oh, sweetie, you are a little kid.
And then, what
Yeah.
about Dad? Your father can't take
Your
any of
father
your
was
father can't
never a
keep
child.
pictures. He doesn't know how to hang on to pictures.
Your father sucks.
And Lorraine's just like, oh, you got him to sit still for a picture, and there's freaking Patrick Wilson with his "I got a poop" face, like clearly unhappy.
I
at
feel
having
like
his picture
He does
taken.
have an "I got a poop" face for the majority of this movie, doesn't he?
Part of Lorraine's, like, surprise at her taking a picture of him, I'm sure she was more than a little bit worried that maybe that played into what was going on with the ghosts and shit. She had to have been like, oh fuck, she was
oh,
so
no.
close to him last time. What, this picture, did he finally, like, get got?
So, on that note, and then because I think it's about time to wrap up at this point, but like, on the note of the Bride in Black, did you guys see the moment that she took him over?
Was it when
Because-
they were yelling at each, when he was yelling at her?
it's a very cool little moment because
Yeah.
originally you see him she's in the hallway with him and he's like, what do you want? What do you want? But then it ends up switching and you see there's a mirror and she's looking into a mirror and he's on the dark
Yeah,
side of the
it
mirror
opens
and
up and
she's in the
he's shouting
building.
into the mirror, but then it switches and she's the one
Yeah.
looking
It's so
at him.
cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, that ending was so... Everything about from that moment to when the movie ended.
I thought the switch
I loved
happened
it.
because, like, he was yelling at her through the mirror or whatever, and then Dalton got back and everything ended, and the last thing you saw of him was yelling in the mirror, and then he wakes up, and so I thought the switch happened, like, off screen, like, he didn't make it back, and she took over his body while he was distracted.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't catch that like switch happened like
Yeah,
in
no,
that
I
scene.
definitely got what you're saying, Emma. I think that all, like, definitely plays into it too, where, like, Dalton was about to get back, which was gonna close off, like, the window for Josh to get out, and she did distract him long enough to keep him away from getting back to his body while Dalton was, like, finishing that up. So I definitely see what you're saying.
It does call into question the demon hierarchy, in my opinion, because we have the lipstick guy being a clear contender for the man in charge,
He
but it
acts
also
like
kind of
he's the man
seems
in
like,
charge.
but it really seems like the bride was calling a lot of the shots.
I think she had. Here's my thing. I think when Elise described the ghost wanting to get into Dalton, it seemed like he had the biggest claim on Dalton. My theory is that the Black Bride had the biggest claim on Josh. Like she had
she
already,
definitely did.
she had already claimed Josh, and
She
the
had
demon
almost
was
gotten
like,
him already.
the demon was like, screw Josh, I don't even need that guy. There's this kid right here. You can have him. I don't care about that guy. That's how I saw it.
Okay.
I don't know. I enjoy this movie a lot. I think it's really fun. I think the more we see of the demon, the worse he is. I
Yeah.
wish... Even when he was crawling on the walls, that was the
Yeah.
only moment that he had that moment of, oh, he's scary again.
Oh, man.
Back.
because he was CGI
And-
there, and so they did a little bit more to kind of like make his appearance and movements like
Yeah.
more like unnatural.
When he, like, punched
One
through the
thing-
wall while he was running on it, fuck yeah.
That was nice.
One thing that I actually do kind of like is that we see him move so little.
Yeah.
Every time that we see him, he's like sitting still, and then you look away and you look back, and he's sitting still somewhere else. It kind of reminded me of the way that like cats move when they're trying to attack something.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, like you wouldn't see him moving because he doesn't want you to realize what he's doing.
Yeah.
And also it feeds into making him seem less natural because you're not seeing him do the natural things, you're just seeing him be places.
Yeah.
However, that's completely ruined by the way that he's so out of breath every time he gets there. So you know he ran there.
Yeah, as someone who hasn't watched horror movies really, that was I feel like you guys talked about like it's a good introduction and that it's not like super duper duper creepy for like a ghost like horror movie. And it's not like super bloody. It is like a good kind of PG-13 intro. Yeah. And I would give it a solid like 7.5. I enjoyed it.
I give it an 8.
I was saying a 7 when I talked to my roommates who wanted my opinion directly after I saw it. I told them a 7.
Yeah.
So I'll stick with that.
So I know I said I was done, but here is actually the last thing that I'm going to bring up.
Okay.
I have one more thing that I forgot about as well.
Cool. So during the seance, we are talking to Dalton.
This is the third time Noah's bringing up the seance.
Yeah, it's a good scene, okay? During the seance, Dalton pops up, and they're like, "Hey, Dalton, what's going on?" He's like, "Please be quiet. They will hear you and hurt me." And they're like, "Dalton, you're a dumb child. Come on back home." And they're like, and he's just like, "No, please stop talking. They will hear you and hurt me." And they're like, "Dalton, please, just come back." And, you know, he's like, "Well, they found me, and now they're hurting me. Thanks for nothing." But then...
And then the demon starts talking.
Well, the demon starts talking, and he interjects with his, like, "You bitch, you whore, blah, 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 blah." But where else are those exact lines used in this movie?
Are those exact lines used in this movie?
They are used again.
Oh!
When the woman in black takes over Josh's body, and he kills Elise. Here's a theory.
That wasn't the demon.
Woman in black came in and obstructed Elise, and the demon was like, "Well, shit." And he took that moment to hijack Dalton and was that close to getting away with it, but it just didn't end up working out. Honestly, the demon might even have blasted enough power that the bride had to back off.
Holy fuck.
Because he was just kind of like in his whole scene there. But I don't know if that's true, but
I like that theory though.
That's cool.
I actually had that thought about how the only person to call her a bitch was the black bride at the end there.
Yeah, I didn't
and it
make
did,
that
and
connection
we
at all.
don't really hear the demon talk at
Yeah.
all.
No, he doesn't talk.
The demon is a pretty wholesome dude. He likes Tiny Tim. Like, come on now.
Would he swear?
He just likes
I don't
collecting
think so.
dolls and sharpening his gloves and...
Yeah. Are those gloves, or are those supposed to be his
think those are
actual
his
fingers?
They look
because
like gloves. They're metal.
Oh, they did have like
They
a
are
cap. It
metal,
looked like a cap too,
but-
like on his fingers.
he's
Yeah.
wearing Edge's rings.
Yes, that's what it looks like. Anyway.
But that is, let's see, the bloody handprint in the bed.
Yeah.
You remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So that was actually also done with lipstick.
Huh.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Listen,
I like
the
it.
demon's just
Yeah, it looks
fab.
good.
Like, you guys gotta
Dude,
stop
they
getting
straight
be
up
so
are
jealous.
Edge's rings though.
Oh, that's a much better picture of
I
the
looked
demon
up
than
this
even
this
appears
picture of the
anywhere in
demon,
movie.
and he's literally wearing like those like metal things that like Edge. For context, Edge is Noah and Jeff's younger sister, and she has these cool little like metal claw rings, and that's 100% what lipstick face demon is wearing.
I'm so
kinda
angry because
looks
that
like
picture she showed me is the best shot of the demon that never appears in the
I
movie.
will send it to the group
It is
chat.
the best looking thing.
Oh, I couldn't find a good shot of him. I wanted to see
Because
one
you
to
can't.
try and...
There's no good shots in the movie. Is the
no,
problem?
none. There's none at all. I don't know. It's his gloves look to me like goth Freddy Krueger claws.
Yeah, that's
You
pretty
know,
much
like
it.
if you were to take the Freddy claw and try to make it look good
add some
instead of
filigree.
be what it is. Yeah. And also, like, why does he have that office? What's he need it for? Is it just a place for him to keep his dolls? What's he doing?
I'm trying to figure out if this is a cosplay or not.
I think I found that exact picture that you're talking about.
Yeah, where he's like reaching towards the camera.
Oh, no.
No.
Well, anyway,
I think that's a
we
cosplay.
really, We should.
I think
it's
it
probably
is.
a cosplay. We
It's a
should.
good cosplay.
All right, one final
Yeah,
thing
Jeff
here.
wanted one more thing.
I think
Yep.
there is a recurring theme in this movie of parents unintentionally setting their children up for failure. Because Dalton would not have broken that ladder. He's not heavy enough.
That's a good
If
point.
Renee hadn't broken it first and then put it back, he would have been okay. But rather than, taking the broken rung out of the ladder or moving the ladder or whatever, or just
or even
not
just
breaking
telling
it in the
him
first
not
place,
to use the ladder.
or telling him not to go into the attic at all. Instead of all of that, she puts it back and makes it look like it's safe, and then he grabs it and falls and hits his head.
But
And Lorraine does the same thing with Josh
and
by
Lorraine
just
did
wiping
the same
his
thing
memories.
with Josh by wiping it exactly. Instead of actually teaching him how to deal with his problem, she just pulled him away from it and made sure that he was unaware of it, and that wound up screwing him over in the end. And that's actually what screws Dalton over as well, because if Josh had been aware of his astral projecting, he could have taught Dalton how to do it safely, and they wouldn't have had any issues.
But with the ladder specifically, I like this idea a lot. But the ladder specifically, she breaks the first rung on the ladder, and he doesn't break it until 5 rungs up.
No,
That's
I
the
think
one
it
that
was.
she breaks. She
was
the
doesn't
one
break
that
the
she-
one that
she broke.
she's
Because-
standing on.
yeah.
She breaks the one that she's holding on to.
Because she
She broke
breaks
the third one
rung,
up.
because Patrick Wilson only needs to step up 1 rung to reach the cord, and she needed to go up 2 or 3.
And she didn't even put her full weight on it. It was just one that she was leaning on when it broke,
Yeah.
and then the kid definitely would have gone up all 3 or 4 of those. Yeah. Wow, that was a stutter if I've ever made one.
No worries. But no, that is
I've probably got a ton of them.
that is a good theory slash thought. But on that theory slash thought, let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a huge thank you to everyone who listened to the podcast today. You can find us on Twitter at Casual Horror Pod, and on Facebook at the same address. I don't think we're actually going to really do anything with the Facebook, but you know what? Maybe we will. Who even knows? We don't know. This is episode 1.
Yeah, we're figuring this shit
Yeah,
out.
We're just
no
getting
clue.
into it.
So yeah, here we are. Thanks for listening. I've been
Hope our
Noah.
opinions weren't too wrong for you.
They were
Yeah, and if
definitely
they
too
were,
wrong.
tell us. Interaction gets our algorithms flowing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That really grinds my algorithm.
Tweet us about how much you hate what I think and how you hate the way that I talk about it so much.
Yeah, definitely do that. I will not cry about it at night. I promise.
But as a final, again, I'm Emma. You can find me at mjade2017. That's EMJADE2017 on Twitter. If you want to talk to me, you can find me there.
Yep. And I'm Nina. You can find me at Nina Wolverina on basically anywhere that people post things. But if you're specifically looking for my horror takes, look at House Usher Rises on Twitter. That is where I post my reviews and my more horror geared art.
I'm Bubba the Bad, BUBBADABAD. Please do talk to me.
He is
I am
lonely.
very lonely.
And you can find me on Twitter at Bubba Wubbadab, BUBBADUBBADABADABADABBADABBAD.
That's not right, is it?
There wasn't even a W in there.
That was bubba dubba 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 dad.
You sound like everyone in Gary's mod.
Next time we will be discussing the movie Poltergeist. I imagine we're watching
Jeff
the
can
original,
finally talk about
not
it.
the remake, right?
Yes.
That would be correct.
The
Correct.
original and not the remake.
Okay, so if you would like to watch that before the next episode comes out, so you have a better idea of what we're talking about as the episode progresses, please feel free to do that. But until
It's
then,
on Netflix right now.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. But until then, we'll catch you next time. Stay spooky.
Stay spooky.
Happy spookies.
Okay, there we go.